Hello again to the Doomer Optimism podcast. This is Jason. Um, and this is second try with my friend Tress. Tress is actually was originally one of the co-founders of Doomer Optimism. It'd be good to catch up again. We tried this once already, and I'm still figuring out Riverside podcast platform, and I accidentally deleted the episode. So we're very rehearsed. So this is going to be a flawless episode now.
Yeah, hopefully.
Got all my notes written on my hand here, so we're going to be good. Uh, hey, Tress, how's it going? You look to be in a very beautiful location. It looks like some kind of green box demonstration site to me.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's the OG one. I'm in my backyard. It's I really it's about one of the few places I feel very, very, very at home. So I like doing as much out here as possible, especially this time of year in Atlanta. Fall and spring are just absolutely gorgeous here, and so I spend as much time outside as I possibly can.
Yeah. Well, today we want to talk a bit about your work outside, your work kind of, I remember a few years ago, you were talking a lot about kind of all the work you're doing at your house, right? You don't have a huge yard, you don't have a farm or anything, but you were trying to kind of maximize, every bit of space you can to make it beautiful, make it abundant, all of these things. Why don't we start there? Why don't we start with like your love for working with nature, and then that can branch into what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it kind of does. It's a sort of a natural seg, right, from one to the other. Is that I started gardening, I'd say, air quotes, about 10 years ago now. But my very first like yield was embarrassing. It was like 6 carrots or something. Like virtually everything I put in the ground did not make it except for these carrots. And they didn't even taste particularly good. But I mean, obviously that's very common, right? Like that's a very common first step for pretty much all beginning gardeners, because gardening, especially annual gardening, is actually pretty difficult.
Mhm.
And But I got the bug. Like I just really liked being outside. I liked how I felt, just like moving your body, being out in getting all that vitamin D and sunlight and stuff. And you just really, it felt good. You also start to recognize the passing of the day. The more time you spend outside, you really get to feel, uh, a day has passed, and so I kind of caught the bug. And then like most everybody on the planet, um, COVID just kicked everything into hyperdrive. I spent all of this time just sitting outside, right? Because I was completely stir crazy. And so I spent a lot of time outside, and it gave me a lot of time to observe the core permaculture stuff, like observe how did water, sunlight, and other natural elements, how did all that like move across this little piece of land that I owned. Um, and so then I started to tinker. I had a lot of time.
Mhm.
I got a job in February, right before COVID hit, and then I lost the job by August. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and obviously it was a stay-at-home job anyway. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I just started just grinding on my yard. And I started on this little patch. I sort of had two front yards, so like we're at the intersection. So like we have our official front yard, which is a slope. It is really very, there's to do something up there would require earth moving and a variety of things, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I started on our side yard, or our second front yard, and I just, I call it gardening out loud. I just started doing random stuff, letting things, because I'm a little scattershot. I have a tendency to start projects and not finish them, or take a spiral approach to them, you know
Yeah.
touch on it, disappear for 3 months, touch on it again, disappear, and that sort of thing. So it ended up being a pretty wild garden, right? I started gardening in my side yard, and it got wild and wilder, and I started adding plants, and there was absolutely no purpose or order to it. I just started throwing things in to see the interactions, and I barely watered them, so a lot of stuff died. But the things that made it turned out those are the native drought resistant stuff, right? Um, all that led me to this kind of like I don't even know. I guess it's just a spiritual moment where the voice that normally works in my head, just kind of yammering all the time. Everything went just dead silent one night during COVID. This was about October of COVID, uh, of the first year, and everything went dead silent, and I just heard like the words like "make food." It was very, I mean, it was legitimately very Field of Dreams.
Nice.
Only it wasn't an external thing. It was just like the voice inside my head just quieted and then just said
Uh-huh.
that clearly, and then the normal chaos continued again. And I was not at that point a Catholic, so I didn't quite know what to do with that. I mean, it was like
Uh-huh.
I could tell I had something profound had just happened,
Uh-huh.
but it was so bizarre and yet also so like just banal. Like there, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like there was nothing. It wasn't like I heard a voice from like
Right.
externalized. I
Are there
was
any
in the
good agrarian Catholic saints? Maybe it was one of them.
yeah, maybe Saint Francis.
Yeah.
And that's who I've ultimately attributed it to. You know, Saint Francis obviously had a lot to do with my conversion, but I knew that it was something profound and I needed to
Mhm.
do something about it. I knew that it was
Yeah.
like, okay, I need to take some action. So I just literally the next day just started Googling like, like just urban agricultural like groups I might be able to like not, just volunteer with or like, just to take a step forward. And it led me to, and I reached out to a bunch of them, and one of them was Roots Down, that replied, and that was Jamie Rosenthal, and I ended up working with him for almost 3 years. As the chief marketing officer, I'm
Yeah.
part owner of the organization, and what Roots Down does is they try and create pathways to better landscaping and urban agriculture for cities, counties, large corporations. They help with policy and that sort of thing. Um, and Yeah, I mean, what all that did was it took like this thing I was dabbling with and then just like turned it into a mission. And
Yeah.
now it's my mission. I mean, I don't really know any other way to put it. It's
Yeah.
the only thing I really want to do on this
Yeah.
planet, and I feel like I'll do it till I keel over, whenever that is.
Yeah. Well, so I remember meeting you. I think it was around the time that you were getting started with Roost Down. We started Doomer Optimism podcast, talking a lot about exactly these kinds of topics. At some point, you decided to kind of back off from the digital space a little bit, and you got really busy with this new business, GreenBox.
I have.
We'll also give a shout out to Tom Ruby. I know Tom. We talked about Tom has been a big influence on your path here. I actually got to meet him this summer. I went up to Kentucky to his place and spent a weekend there, and it was quite lovely. Toured his food forest and drank liqueurs and bourbon. Lovely time. Tom's a great guy. So shout out to Tom. You want to talk about kind of this kind of second shift, at least perceived from the outside, where you come to embrace Catholicism, you start a new business, you kind of back off from social media a bit. What was this all about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it kind of it was just really a converging of a lot of things, my mom and another friend who's very into like astrology, and like it basically corresponds with Saturn has been moving through some house that is like, it's about huge life. It's like a life, uh it's a life period, right? It's something you're working on things. And so a lot of these things I've been working on over the last 15 years or so have like sort of like converged, and Catholicism is one of them. Though I never, if you'd asked me 12 years ago, 15 years ago, would you become a Christian? It may not, I probably would have said, yeah, I could see that. I could
Mhm.
see that happening. A
Mhm.
Catholic, on the other hand, I would have been, no, no way. No way. There's no way that's going to happen. That's completely far fetched. Um, but my march towards Christianity, my
Mhm.
embracing of natural urbanism, which really came out of a 20-year love affair with like new urbanism, and realizing that
Mhm.
walkability and braided
Mhm.
integrated communities is part of it, and then Roots Down brought the natural part of it to me. I've started and uh largely failed multiple times with businesses in the past. I feel like entrepreneurship is really my thing. And so it was like all of these things combined in my last year with Roots Down, which 2024, I realized I really had much more of a passion of like I wanted to change space, right? I felt like I was given the mission to make food, and while that's two words, so it's
Mhm.
somewhat broad. It's a broad mission. Uh, Getting governments to do slightly better landscaping policy did not seem like that was what I was supposed to be doing with that mission. I needed to be
Yeah.
directly changing the land at scale. That's an important part of it. And so I left Roots Down in 2024 to start, not 2024, 2023, to start GreenBox. Um, as a regenerative landscaping option that would be able to compete with regular traditional mow and blow landscaping in urban and suburban environments. So
Mhm.
it's a model for average homeowners to like they hire us and we slowly but surely change their landscape over to a regenerative model,
Mhm.
and that one that's then integrated with other members in our
Mhm.
system so that we can start to create an actual network of I'd say even basically distributed farms,
Mhm.
essentially. And that's was the kind of impetus for Greenbox. And so, you know, um, it it has been a very interesting ride. I mean, it's impossible to talk about the Greenbox story without bringing in Tom.
Mhm.
Tom and his wife Laura are absolutely amazing people. Tom has been instrumental in my professional and spiritual growth. I mean, he is the reason I came to the faith. Every kind of step I took towards the faith, like, was because of him being like, "Hey, you should read this book. Hey, you should come to this thing," or "Hey," and he just, you know, uh, he provided a beautiful pathway to the faith for me,
Mhm.
as well as he's an amazing business mentor. So him and I talk every week about the business, and he's really helping me develop as a leader. Um, and, I just have realized that, like, business is a way to get things done at scale.
Mhm.
If you can align people's profit motive with people's personal motives, you can get a lot of stuff done very quickly. And that's
Yeah.
what I've seen. I saw
Yeah.
another one. I saw another one popping in.
No, don't be touching buttons. You can
Emoji.
you can say hi, but don't be
Hey,
pushing buttons. All right.
what's up? How's it going?
This is Kaleo. Kaleo, this is gonna go like tons of people are gonna see this. So you're gonna be all over the internet. Is that really what you want?
Okay.
No, I might have to blur out your
Yeah.
face.
It's been-
All
At
right.
least
Yeah.
10 people are going to see
Oh,
this.
I know. Yeah. All ten of our remaining audience from the beginning. No,
Emoji.
don't be pushing buttons. No,
I
no, no,
want
no,
to
no.
press the
You want to push an emoji. No, no,
Yeah,
there is a react button here.
somewhat.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
essentially that's what Greenbox is. It's an
Yeah.
attempt to really kind of show that environmentalism it doesn't have to be a nonprofit. It doesn't have to be something you're doing extra to give.
Yeah.
People are already paying a landscaper. They can just pay us to do that.
Yeah.
And
So this is
so
we
yeah.
talked a bit about this last time in the last episode, but let's revisit it again. So, when I first
Hi.
met you, one of the things that was very unique about you is you were very good at going on very long rants, going after capitalism, and
Mhm.
just all the ways it's distorted, it's degenerate, all of these things. And yet, as you said yourself, you got your MBA, so you believe in business, you believe in the power of business to do things, but you have really withering critiques of capitalism writ large. So do you want to talk about that tension and what you see is, the downside of, kind of the capitalist model of social change versus what is the potential?
Yeah, I mean the tension doesn't go away. And honestly, when we met, when Doomer Optimism really kind of got going, um, I I'd reached a point where I was very frustrated with. I mean, and I'm still very frustrated with large scale oligarchic capitalism, right? Um, it's it's complicated, because capitalism is almost like it's like a stick of dynamite, right? Like
Right.
if you need to get through a mountain for to build a railroad, you have to, you know, it's a really helpful way to do it. Dynamite is a really helpful way to do that. And so the idea of pooling capital together, which is really, if we go back to like the Dutch version of it, right? It was just like people with a little bit of money came together to create a large enough money that they could actually go achieve something collectively, right? Capitalism in its initial instance is very was somewhat collectivist in a way, right? It was, the whole purpose of it was that people could pool their money. They didn't have to go through the king. They could pool their money and they could go achieve a social aim. Why did they do it? Because they'd make more money on the back end, right? They took the risk and they made their share of the revenues. When that model came in contact with the new uh, government of the US, right? It became something very different. It became like this massive monster that, you know, we created omnipotent beings, if you will, right? And of course, the initial version of corporate capitalism, of stock capitalism in the early 1800s, late 1700s, was not like that. It was like, we are going to allow you to create a railroad company to build this section of railroad. And when that's built, you can operate for 20 more years and then this company must die, right? That was the original version of the joint stock company. And what did it achieve? I mean, obviously, we can talk endlessly about the social consequences of all of that capital, right? But it achieved the railroad. It achieved, um, you know, uh, ubiquitous global communication. Like, it achieved all of these incredible things. But the point was that there was always this end date. And then we decided that corporations didn't have to have end dates. And then we decided that they basically could own IP forever, right? And so essentially we allowed these things, which Hannah Arendt calls like, rule by nobody. Bureaucracy is rule by nobody, because no one is responsible for what this entity does. And the entities are now, there's like, we all know, like there's like 12 entities in the whole world that own everything, virtually everything, right? And it's obviously bad. It's obviously corrosive and it's obviously horrible. And it's anathema to virtually anything doom or optimism stands for, which is bringing things, essentially devolving power to the lowest of possible unit, right? That's I would say generally our heuristic as doom or optimists, right? And modern capitalism is exactly opposite of that, right? It is the anathema of that. However, the initial goal of capitalism, of pooling your capital together with other people to go do social things, right? That is proven. I mean, a stick of dynamite is a stick of dynamite. And so uh, I have made it my mission for the last 15 years, as soon as I got my MBA, was to find a way to make uh, business to put business back in its place as a really, really good way of unifying community and getting big projects done, right? And you look at any city, any successful city, right? That any of the cities, the thousands of cities, tens of thousands that were started since the 1700s in this country, the ones that made it were the ones that turned from whatever was the animating like reason they did it, right? It could have been religious, it could have been social. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons people started a city, right? What actually turned it into something that lasted was always business. It was always the market class. It was always people, the center of life was the freaking general store. As soon as you had, you had a bar, a church, and a general store, right? You had a town and you had the building blocks for something that could last. Um, and so business is incredibly important. And so I have been committed to business, committed to the idea that business can make something, or organizations of people can make something important to society, for as long as, I've been thinking about this stuff. So about 15 years. But what we have in this, what we call capitalism today, is a complete perverse monstrosity. I'd argue we already hit the singularity, right? AI is just the purest distillation of this monster we created in the 1800s that is autonomous. It is not subservient to humans. It clearly has humanity is not a primary goal of its existence, right? They don't care. If people have to die, then people die. It's for the big greater goal of this monster. And it outlives humans. It lasts longer than us. We just happen to be the cogs that make it up, right? And I'm against that. And that's what makes me a doomer optimism. I think that that is going to lead us off a cliff as people. And what will bring us back is a much more communitarian and community oriented way of living, which includes people doing shit for money, right? It includes people
Well,
making stuff
I
for money.
mean, to be clear, yeah, I mean, my question was a bit misleading because businesses and markets have been around much longer than capitalism in its modern form, allied with the nation state, has been around. One way that I've thought about it is that the difference, however, is that the markets were embedded in the commons, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
Right. So the commons, you can define it as kind of this larger sense of like social good and social cohesion and mutuality. Um, and once that went away, once those things were dissolved, then it became this beast. At least
Hmm.
that's one way that I think about it. Okay, so yeah, let's get
Well, let me say one last
yeah.
thing on that is I think that it's a matter of abstraction, right? Like that's
Mhm.
ultimately what has happened is that like
Yeah.
most of our economy now is an economy based on buying and selling abstractions of abstractions of abstractions, right? Markets are a natural thing. As soon as people produce any surplus whatsoever, they start getting together and bartering or buying and selling, right? I mean, that is a natural thing. It's been around as long as you said, as long as humans have been getting together. I mean, there's argument for Neanderthals and Homo sapiens having small market sections where they got together and they traded stuff, right? Or they helped each other out. And so, yeah, anyway, it's a matter of abstraction. And I think that what happened with the joint stock company, right, was it was the first really big abstraction from an economic standpoint. Is there's this thing that is not human, but it
Mhm.
has a good in and of itself, right?
Mhm.
It's a machine. It was a financial machine, right? And then we started building more and more financial machines, and then we started giving them uh, no lifespan. They could live forever,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
that's where the problem has come.
Yeah, and side note, we'll talk about this later, but I'm gonna want some of the information about where I can buy some stocks in GreenBox, early, right?
Yeah,
Before you do a
yeah,
public offering. I'd
yeah,
appreciate that. You know, we'll talk about that on the side. Um,
yeah.
now let's get into the nuts and bolts of GreenBox. So,
Mhm,
what do you guys do day to day? What do you think makes you different than other landscaping companies? you know, including, above and including what you plant or what you do on
mhm,
the land, but just in terms of like, how you structure the business or, kind of what you think the mission is of the business.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. I'll answer the big question first, which is what is Greenbox, right? We are ostensibly a competitor to the landscaping industry, but I would argue we're actually a replacement for the landscaping industry. Um, it kind of grew out of this question that, or this statement that Jamie, my business partner at Roots Down, would always say, is that we don't need a million urban farmers because we already have them. We just call them landscapers. And that statement has always kind of cracked my head open and been like, okay, wait, that's really profound, right? Like we already have a 1.7 or a $170 billion a year industry devoted to taking care of the land, right? They just happen to take care of it in a way that actually is destroying the land. They're not actually taking care of it, they're destroying it, right?
Mm,
And so it started with this premise that I needed to create a company that would take care of the land, achieving many of the same aims and goals of the landscaping industry and the clients of the landscaping industry, while the practices completely flipping them on their head and doing only regenerative practices. So instead of the end state, the beautiful end state where everything's manicured being the end goal is actually building soil. It's building an ecosystem. It's building natural spaces that theoretically could eventually start to maintain themselves, or start to require less inputs over time, right? Um, and that was the impetus for it. But then squeezing it into the business box meant that it had to sell something for money that would at a profit so that it could continue doing it. That's part of, I would say, the regeneration or the sustainability of the business itself, is that it has a stable income. So there's no reliance on just generosity. It's like, no, we're doing a thing for someone, they pay us for it. Right.
Mhm.
And as long as we continue to find people that will do that, it's sustainable. It's something that can continue to exist. Even if something
Right.
happens to me, I'm irrelevant. The thing can continue to exist, which is exactly what I just said was the horrible thing about joint stock companies, right? Is that it
Right.
can exist long beyond its founders. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so it really came, what it brass tacks is, we just, what I've had to find over the last 2 years is that I initially built the company almost exactly, it was like the chassis of a landscaping company, right? I just thought I would build a different parts. And that has turned out to not be true. I've discovered what I think Tesla discovered, is the opportunity, when you are once you take a gas engine out of it, all these other parts, all these things that support that also can be taken out, which means you have all of this room to do different shit, right? Because you're fundamentally building a different car, that again achieves the same ends, but is a very different thing. And so I had to learn that. And so in the end, what the company has kind of evolved into is that we have two growers. We'll go out to someone's yard every week for an hour. So they basically get 2 human hours every week of direct labor, and they do whatever is needed, right? So that follows the seasons, which is one way we combat the what do you do in the wintertime, right?
Right.
It's like, I don't know, what would you do on a farm in the wintertime where there's still plenty of crap to do, right?
Right.
Um, and so we do that through the seasons, and that's weeding, watering, planting, trimming, pruning. Anything that's 6 feet and below, we'll handle. Mulching, lots of mulching, mulching up leaves and putting them in beds. Like, there's an
Right.
endless array of activities we have to do. But what they're really getting beyond just the core service there is they get all these add-ons. Like, they get a plant a month. So every month that they pay for service, in the spring and in the fall, we plant 6 plants that they just are donated to them. They're all native or edible plants. And then we also, we're steadily building this kind of membership network of people that can start to share things between them. So that's where you kind of get the distributism involved in that a little bit. For instance, we have one member who has 2 mature peach trees that produce about 40 baby peach trees every year. And so we can just dig those up and give them out to any members in the network that want peach trees, as
Those
well
just
as
suckers or are those from seed
they're from
or
seeds.
grafting? Okay.
No,
Okay.
they're actually just, they drop with the peaches,
Okay.
and they're new trees, and so we it gives us an opportunity to sell them, help our members sell them, and we can split the profits with them. Like, there's a variety of things that this
Mhm.
type of model opens up.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. So that's, I think, an interesting, you use this term membership model. So it's like a membership, you pay for the membership, you start getting these services. But ideally, the members themselves start interacting with one another and sharing among themselves, and it becomes, in some ways, a bit like a cooperative model, even though
mhm.
the larger superstructure is still the business. But do you want to talk a little bit more about? So you gave the example of the peaches. Um, can you? Are there other examples where members in your network, got to know each other or started kind of like helping each other out or sharing tips or ideas or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple of members only get-togethers, so like we brought a couple of members over to another member's house to check out her property, see what she'd been doing. That member made dinner for everybody, and homemade pizzas in their pizza oven, and it was a nice little moment. I mean, right now we're still quite small. right? So there's not a lot of members. This is one of those things like any other membership organization. Like the more people are in the network, the more there's network effects, right? Um, and we're going to be starting to do a lot more of this in 2026 of really holding regular member events, mainly because we're finally out of my garage and we're actually at a location that we can
Nice.
hold these types of events. Um, I'm also, looking to start expanding into things like material recovery, right? So,
Hmm.
we have members that have a refrigerator that they want out of their house, and we're visiting them every week anyway. So why can't we
Hmm.
just grab that refrigerator for them and then take it to the hard recycling center and get it recycled, And so we're really looking at finding all the ways that we can help people connect to each other, connect to local
Hmm.
community source services, as well as just make a regenerative life easier for them.
Yeah. Nice. And the members, the people that you work with, is there a range of like, I'm guessing some people just kind of want hands off as like, I'm paying you guys to do this thing, make your yard pretty, give me some things, some edible things to pick up once in a while, but this is all you. And then I'm guessing there's others who are kind of really hands on and they're doing a lot of their own things and they just want kind of some extra help and advice and support. Is that would that be fair? There's I'm guessing maybe a normal distribution of like people on all sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do come in like really kind of two core flavors, which are um people that, like you said, people that really are like, I want to do this, but I don't have the time or inclination or talent, let's say, to actually pull this off. And so I'd rather pay you to do it for me. Right. Um, and that's lovely, right? Like way to, vote with your dollars. Right.
Hmm.
Um, then we have members that are much more involved, right? That are really we're almost like just additional labor. We're a force multiplier for them for what
Hmm.
they already wanted to do. Um, we have those kind of range. There's a gradient there. There's some that are actually like literally out there when we're out there working
Hmm.
alongside us, right?
Yeah.
Then we have some that are sometimes these are the older members, right, who were very involved in their garden, but now they're just getting on in years, and it's harder for them to do the
Hmm.
things they need to get done. So it's kind of like a hired strong back, right? They just need a strong back to come and help them out, and offer some guidance we find with especially with people who have established gardens that they put a lot of time and effort into, they just they can't hire a normal landscaping company because the
Yeah.
normal landscaping company has no idea what they're looking at, right? And so they really need a practitioner who can actually take care of it. And our prices are comparable with a traditional landscaping. It's really,
Hmm.
affordability is something that I've been really committed to from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I want this to be a more mass market thing. I want it to be able to compete on all fronts with traditional
Yeah.
landscaping.
Yeah. Interesting. Another kind of business question. So in terms of like your input, so for example, you do a lot of mulching. I'm guessing you either find the mulch somewhere, you got to buy the mulch or compost or trees and stuff. I'm guessing right now, you're having to perhaps you're able to propagate, say, some of the plants for yourself, or, but I'm guessing a lot of them you have to buy in. Do you have thoughts about kind of vertical integration of the business of like, at some point, instead of buying plants to plant at people's places, we're gonna produce the plants ourselves, or, wood chips, we're going to source wood chips somewhere that, is connected to our forester friend who, needs a place to dump them or so. I don't know if that applies in Atlanta.
Hmm.
That would apply here.
Yeah.
Um, but you know what I mean?
Hmm.
The question makes sense. Like, how are you thinking about how this so there's like, in my mind, there's kind of like two different ways for the business to evolve. One is just get more members, more stuff going on between members, get the network effects, get the scale effects, and then there's like kind of like the vertical integration component. Like, are you interested in the vertical integration component, or is that just something that no, that's not my, that's out of our scope?
I think, well, no, I'm very interested in it. Like, I mean, I would say that you know, one of the things that draws me to this as a business, aside from an opportunity to achieve my mission from God, is that it's an endless puzzle box for me, right? Because there's always something else to kind of involve. We really are getting to the point we have the day to day of servicing our members down. So the next big task is to just double in size. Just get, I have one unit of two growers who are managing their people, and now I need to get another unit of two
Right.
growers that are managing another set of people, and um, but it's the same system. It's just replicating it over and over and over again.
Mhm.
But the thing that's interesting is that all the members we build, the more members we have, the more we're building a marketplace.
Mhm.
So then the question is, okay, well, we're if you think of it, we're sort of uh managing acres of potential farmland. It just happens to be distributed. But what is the central piece of that? It's us, right? We're the bees buzzing around all the gardens, right? And
Mhm.
so now there's an opportunity to get raw materials from
Mhm.
them. There's an
Yeah.
opportunity to connect with value add like makers and crafters, right? And
Yeah.
then we have that market, and now we're a
Mhm.
marketplace. That enables
Mhm.
essentially a more distributist model. It's hyper local, right?
Right.
And so yeah, my vision is absolutely I don't see any reason why I would pay for inputs. The inputs are readily available everywhere. One of the things our house stuff, as an example, our house style is we use, unless there's another purpose or something else the member wants, we use fallen limbs as edging material, right?
Mhm.
Um, it's cheap. It lasts a long time and is incredibly easy to replace, right? Your property will provide you the replacement pieces every year for free, and it looks cool, right? There's a lot of ways you can gussy it up to look cool, and so then what does that mean? And this is kind of an example of like the process being roughly the same, but it's like now is a different type of process. So now instead of going to the store and buying our materials, right, or placing an order, we're sending someone out on the weekends to go source free fallen limbs everywhere. They're
Mhm.
literally everywhere. And then that person goes and spends, let's say, you know, he I pay that person $120 for that day to go buy the materials. Well, they've just gotten, $1,000 worth of materials or saved our members $1,000 in materials, right?
Mhm.
By doing that. But there's also now these are core components for value add stuff, right? So if there's someone in our community who wants to make little rustic fences out of fallen sticks and stuff, right? Well, that's now a saleable product. Someone spent time on that. And so this is how it all kind of starts to build on itself. So,
Mhm.
obvious next steps for us are scavenging, like I said, scavenging, junk removal, recycling, right? That's an obvious next step for us. Once we have that, not everything is going to be recycled. So now we have something for, like, I don't know, half priced garden supplies, right? Just like, here's a collection of stuff. Come on Saturdays and buy it for really cheap. Um, you know, Plants, a nursery is absolutely something I will be starting
Mhm.
shortly. Um, because why pay for plants? Like, it's bonkers. Why are we paying for
Right.
plants? Well, I know why, because I don't have them and I need to go plant
Yeah.
them, right? But like,
Mhm.
I'll start to know how many plants I need for the whole year, right? So
Yeah.
let's go make those plants ourselves.
Mhm.
As well as the more members we have, the more we have volunteer plants that we can just dig up
Yeah.
and transplant elsewhere. Um, and
You could
that
probably even teach some of your members how to propagate. Like if they have a peach tree and they get the seeds, propagating, you can propagate peaches from seed, or
Mhm,
blueberry bushes, you can take hardwood cuttings and propagate those, or blackberry bushes, do tip layering, whatever, and propagate clonal
mhm.
propagation or whatever. I'm guessing that's, there's ways to cooperate with the members in terms of like getting supply as well and giving them
Mhm.
discounts or whatever, like how they're contributing to the network, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, long term, I definitely see a essentially like I don't know, just like a trade system of some sort, right? Like
Yeah.
that people, we can track what inputs people are putting into the system, and then they can use those to get output, in some capacity. Maybe it is like a coin, or whatever. It's too far down the road for me to
Yeah.
really be thinking about specifics, but um, you know, as if we can get people as much of their daily calories and things that they need that from a hyper local source, that's really going to be one of that's our core mission. And so that's the superstructure we're trying to build. I
Yes.
keep thinking that GreenBox is not so much a landscaping company as like a system of regeneration. It's a
Mhm.
way that you can spin up a regenerative system in
Mhm.
that is self-sustaining essentially,
Yeah.
and doesn't require volunteers, endless volunteers, and actually people can make money
Mhm.
contributing to the system.
Yeah.
An interesting side note of that is that we actually have one member who is also a part-time grower. So she works 1 day a week as a grower while she also has our growers go to her house and help
Mhm.
her with her yard, right?
Nice.
And so there's always that opportunity, right? Are
Yeah.
you in love with what we're doing enough that you actually want to just come work with us, right? Go help do this in your neighborhood, right? And so there's lots of ways it can grow sideways and vertically.
Yeah, well, this is related, but if you'll indulge me, I'd love to throw this idea off of you. So my goal, I'm also, I think, kind of like you, I have a kind of an office job currently. I work on the computer a lot, and I'm thinking a lot about starting a nursery myself, particularly edible perennials. I've been experimenting for years now on my own property, but I'm getting more and more into propagation. I'm thinking about ways in which, and there's really kind of a like around here, there's a really good kind of grafted fruit tree nursery in the region, and you can get other things from local extension, but it's kind of limited. But there's really not really good options for, say, nut trees, for
Okay.
example, or even like, you know, I don't know, a lot of kind of berry bushes and stuff. There's just not a lot of great options. Most of the nurseries around here are, they're selling ornamental plants. That's what most people want to buy. And so I've been thinking a lot about, both, you know, starting kind of a really low, kind of a low infrastructure, low capital investment nursery, both for a local market, but also to sell online as well,
Hmm.
like bare root plants, like bare root chestnut trees or something,
Hmm.
things of that nature. Um, and I can see, of course, we're pretty, we're like, 4 hours or so apart, but I could see, if I was a nursery in the Atlanta area, wanting to collaborate with you, I could see like there being ways to do that without just you buying my plants and then, but I don't know, other interesting kind of
Hmm.
synergistic opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just brought that up to indulge for you to indulge me, but yeah, it's something that I'll probably, because I don't have an MBA or anything, so it's probably something that I'll probably want to consult with you as this thing develops. I mean, it's going to start off
Yeah.
slow, like start ramping up over the next few years, kind of thing. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's just I think I'm in the same boat as you in terms of like wanting
Yeah.
to move in that direction.
Well, well, my first thought is 100% do it. Like this is sustainable landscaping, just everything from just electric only to what we do, regenerative stuff, right, is like 2% of $170 billion industry. It is tiny. If this thing even grows to 10%, we're talking about like any player in this at any level
Yeah,
of the value chain is in a position to be at the front of what is going to be inevitably a gigantic wave, right? And so my advice to anyone is if you have any inclination to enter this market at all, at any level of the value chain, do
right.
it. You
Yeah,
will make money. It may not be a lot, but you will make money, and you'll have a good time, and you'll be doing something good for the planet. One of the interesting things about the Atlanta market is, of course, we have significantly more people, right? Like we have a much higher
yeah,
population density than where you live, but There are lots of little like homespun native nurseries that have been starting to pop up, like literally people just growing them on their property and then having a, by appointment, like you buy them online and then you
Facebook
just drive and
Marketplace
pick them
or
up. Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
exactly. And none of them can keep their plants in stock, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And
That's
there are a
I've noticed
few,
that too, is the nurseries that I usually, I buy a lot of like saplings and seeds from nurseries like in upstate New York, right?
yep,
And they put their plants for sale like twice a year and then they sell out almost immediately. And it's
yeah,
and there, and
yeah,
there's a, one guy was saying like we can't even begin to meet the demand. Like it's just,
yeah.
as one small
That's nationwide. Every market is facing, has some variation of that, right? Everywhere. And so, one thing, we recently had this thing called the Think Natives First conference with a local organization called Root Local. They put it on, and it was industry. So it was not designed for like gardeners. It was for like industry people to come and learn about. We're meeting the whole family today.
Yep, this is the other one.
What's up?
Sorry. If you
Um,
lost your train of thought.
no, it's all right. It's
Mm.
totally fine. The yeah, so what we discovered is all these industry people, and we discovered that like there's just there's a somewhere, like my dad used to say, there's an ass for every saddle. There is an ass for every saddle in this industry. Like we need everything. We need large commercial developers to be on board. We need large wholesale nurseries to be on board. We need growers to be on board. We need landscaping companies to be on board. There's so much opportunity. So like whatever you want to start, yes, we need it. Right? It's needed. One of the things I've noticed here in Atlanta that probably is the biggest need is a larger retail presence in the city, right? So there's a couple of like cheap retail places that are, obviously there's Home Depot, there's Pikes, there's that shit, right? But like there's something called like Growers Outlet, but it's like 45 minutes out of the city, right? Or an hour out of the city. Now you're going to go there and you're going to get an echinacea for 350, and it's going to look good and it's going to be well grown, but it's a 45-minute to an hour and 15-minute drive, right? There's really nothing like that in the city. You have these little pocket things that are either by appointment or they're only open on Saturdays and Sundays, and they have limited supply. And it's like what we actually need almost is like a a big enough buyer, right, to create a marketplace and turn them into growers, wholesale growers who sell to this major buyer who has a big enough footprint to actually handle the immense demand already in the city, right? I mean, there's huge demand for this. And that demand is being fulfilled by like native plant sales put on by the Georgia Native Plant Society or by the Chattahoochee River Reserve. Like it's just these random things. So it's almost like following fish around. Like it's like people are just going to all the plant nurseries to get what they need. That's barely servicing the retail supply, and that's absolutely a no-go for the commercial supply, right? If you're a commercial like developer or you're a landscaper like me, like it is a hassle. I have to go to 4 different places to get the plants I need for one build. I'm doing that because I'm committed to it. If you're just committed to the money, there's no way you're doing that. That's a complete waste of your time. So you're going to buy what's available from the wholesale suppliers. And so there's a real need. I mean, the demand is there. I in my business career of almost 20 years, I have never seen the difference in supply and demand so stark, and yet no one on the supply side seems at all interested in solving the core problem, which is that there's not enough supply. So it's like we could use Atlanta. I bet you could use 20 more small growers,
Yeah.
20 more
Yeah,
at
it
least.
seems like there's a need for kind of a mixed scale, right? Because there is a, an argument for kind of like larger scale wholesalers who can supply businesses like yours
Yeah.
or developers or municipal governments or whatever. But there's also I think, an argument for distributed small scale suppliers scattered all throughout. And one reason for
Yeah.
that is just genetic diversity, right? If
Hmm.
tons of people, in their own backyard or whatever, are propagating plants that, they're selecting the ones that do well in their particular area, and over time you're getting a lot more genetic diversity if you have a bunch of small scale, growers, suppliers, as well as kind of the bigger guys who can supply in much larger volumes. And that seems to
Yeah.
be kind of you kind of need both, right? But
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
definitely need a lot more smaller scale suppliers and just general literacy, I think, as people who are more and more people are becoming interested in creating regenerative lawns, just more and more literacy about things that you can do for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Things that
Yeah.
of how you can propagate things for yourself and you can harness local resources in your neighborhood, things of that nature. Like it's all of the above is good. And so I like, I think you're, there's an ask for every saddle, right? That I think that's great advice. Like if you're interested in this stuff and you're listening, like there's probably a niche for you somewhere. Like
I
you just
would
got to find it.
say there is 100% a niche for you. It does not matter what you want to do. There is a place for you in this, because the demand is just so far outstrips the supply of everything, right? I
And
mean,
that
true,
will
like,
hopefully the demand will hopefully grow, by orders of magnitude, right? Like that's the dream,
yeah,
that's the goal. And if the supply is already not meeting the demand, right? Like the supply
yeah,
needs to kind of like get geared up and get on board.
yeah. I mean, and the thing is, we're so small that we're not even, this industry is so small, it's not even like being watched, right? Like if you go to like the main, like, uh, industry like experts who track and say, okay, this is going to be the growth of the landscaping industry. Like we're not even tracking. No one is tracking this, right? In some respects, it's all hype or um, oh, what's the word I'm thinking of? Subjective. It's like anecdotes. All I know is that every time a landscaper like me enters this field, they go upscale in 4.5 months. Because as soon as you have any skill, you can charge whatever the hell you want for it, right? Because there's not enough people to meet demand. I have made a commitment to like affordability, and so we have not largely done that. But it's same thing with the nurseries. Like if every native nursery is out of their stock by September or October, that tells you something, right? Like they're not making enough to meet the demand.
Yeah.
And I think also, the thing is that the demand builds more demand, right? The more of these that get successfully implemented, the more yards like this, the more people realize it's a viable alternative. You think about the difference that it's something like 65% of American homeowners in 2022 considered climate change a major issue, like a major issue, one that that does alter the decisions they make, the buying decisions they make, right? And
Mhm.
yet like 2%, 3% of homeowners are doing this with their yards, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one could argue that it's the most there's no part of the climate change or ecological destruction story that you have more control over than what you do with your literal piece of the earth, right? If nothing else you can do is going to have as much impact as what you actually have control over, which is your piece of the earth, right? And I think as people start to understand that, we're going to see that delta between 2% and 65% start to
Mhm.
meet, right? And if this thing goes from 2% to 30% of the market, I mean, this is .com boom level, like magnitudes of growth potential, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, speaking
hello,
of
hello.
growth aspirations, for the industry, how do you, of course, I'm sure, part of your answer is going to be, well, there's too many things we can't foresee right now. We're going to evolve and respond to, respond to opportunity. But, if you were to have like a 10-year vision for GreenBox, like what do you want GreenBox to be doing in 10 years?
When you say in this,
Oh, I kind of wanted to hear the question. I wanted to see if it was adding some extra
What's your
flavor to the
question?
question.
when, when you said in this, did you mean the Indus River?
The Indus River? No, the industry. But
Oh,
yeah, but that's interesting.
That is an
And we have
incredible
a little
question.
etymological, lecture here.
I know. Now I'm
Yeah.
curious. Is there some sort of random relationship between
There,
these two
there might
words?
be Indo-European
Uh,
language.
um, yeah. So, well, okay. I have very big ambitions for this company. There's a couple things I want to achieve. I want to achieve regeneration at the scale that is required to save the planet, right? And I applaud there are several people attempting these things at this scale. Like I think Joe Brewer's doing amazing work. I really appreciate his all of his attempts to combine bioregions into workable frameworks. I'm trying something similar, but from a more crass capitalist side of things. Of like, I want a business that is capable of operating at a scale that can compete with the headwinds we're facing, right? Which means this organization needs to be in management and helping transition millions of acres, hundreds of thousands of acres, right? That's what needs to happen in order to combat the speed of deforestation, the speed of ecological degradation, the potential effects of climate change on food, and all of the things that we're facing, right? We're facing all of these things at once. And so the response has to be massive. Now, normally you'd hope that governments, who are already the pools of all of these resources, would be able to help in that respect, but it seems simultaneously every global government seems to have given up at the same time and decided they're just going to pursue BS. And so it's up to us, right?
Mm.
But scale is still an important part of this. One of the things I like most about the GreenBox idea is just simply that it's not really scalable, it's replicable, right?
Mm.
In a way that, like, when I take sort of as inspiration something like Ace Hardware, for instance, right, which is actually all individually owned stores that Ace is a cooperative, is a buying cooperative, so it allows individual owners to pool their money together, right, to have enough buying power to get things cheaper from wholesalers, right? That's the whole purpose of Ace. I believe REI operates in a similar fashion. And I really envision that is that I see that anyone who wants to start a green box can start a green box, and then they're part of that cooperative. And as we get more and more and more network effects, we can start to actually start to braid together bioregions and a much more distributist model of things. It's very important that it doesn't scale per se, right? That it is not,
Right.
a regional office in Atlanta running a bunch of field offices. It's like a
Mm.
bunch of individually owned and operated field offices participating in the wider network that's available at
Mm.
scale, right? Which you only
Yeah.
get at scale. And so that's my vision. 10 years is a long time. I mean, I've uh, almost, we've doubled in size in 2 years, right? So if we continue that pace, we'll be a very large company in 10 years.
Right.
I view it as somewhat, my goal is to have it be somewhat, or if entirely, like recession proof, or depression proof, in that people need food. They'll always need food. That there's no, they need food, they need community, they need clean water, they need access to medicine, and Greenbox is capable of providing all of those things in a replicable model that could sustain, even if, the idea is that even if things get fractured regionally, it can still be a backbone. In that respects, I would argue that we're modeled much more after the Catholic Church, and how it was able to sustain society after the collapse of Rome, was because it was decentralized but built around a central kind of series of premises. Um, and I view Greenbox as being in a position to operate similarly, if not as we're not going to save anyone's soul. That's not what I'm arguing at all. But it's a matter of using the model, because it's clearly worked for 2,000 years.
Well, you provided me the easiest segue in the world to talk about the relationship between your newfound faith and your business aspirations. You said that Greenbox won't save everybody's souls. I don't know about that. If your
Well,
vision
it
comes
saved
to
my
pass,
soul.
and yeah, yeah, I think that nature, I take a sacramental view. I've also recently become Christian, not Catholic, but Christian. And I certainly see, I take a sacramental view, of nature in particular, of kind of, being, if you pay attention enough, seeing kind of the incarnation, of God, you know, partially, it's partially reflected in Christ, but it's also partially reflected just everywhere, right, in the whole creation. And I think that more you know more and more people rediscovering their bodies in the land and harmonious relationships between humans and with each other and in nature, I think that will save a lot of souls, actually. So anyway, that was an
Yeah.
aside. But anyway,
No.
but to the question, do you want to talk more about how does your work inform your faith, and how does your faith inform your work?
Um, well, to your point, I was really just trying to make sure I wasn't being sacrilegious or grandiose. There is there is no supplement for the church, right? We're merely a gnat that's part of its overall mission and vision. But um, they're completely intertwined. It's impossible to separate them. I think putting a fish on your work vans is cheesy and silly, but we are a Catholic organization, right? It is an explicitly Catholic mission,
Yeah,
um, and I believe that there's no better spreader of the gospel than like nature. Just being
yeah,
in nature. I don't understand how anyone could not believe in God and be in nature, right? Um, and it worked for me. I believe that in some respects, from a crass business side, one of the things that make what we do so sticky is that I think that as soon as people start working with the dirt, they become addicted to the joy of it. And
right,
so we're essentially peddlers of joy. And so it's much easier for people to stick around with us because we helped, you know, show them joy, right? We helped introduce them to a sustainable, an endless flow of joy. It's always there, right? Um, and just as God is always there. And so, um, yeah, I view, my faith is about as old as this business is. The business came directly out of what I believe was a direct calling. Um, and my guiding saint is Saint Francis of Assisi. He's the one that reading his biography is what kind of Chesterton's biography of him is
uh-huh,
what really kind of converted me. Um, and I think that supporting nature and reinstating man as the king of God's dominion on earth, right? Is one of the most spiritual things you can do, one of the most religious, sacramental things that you can do. I mean, God, I mean, it's all right there. I mean, it's all right there in the beginning of it all. He said, "This is take care of this. Like you are the keystone species. You're the
hmm,
keystone species. Take care of this. It is
right,
your job to take care of this."
right,
Um, and when we became like God by, or thought we did by eating the damn fruit, right? Uh, we decided that we were going to play God by deforming his creation.
yeah,
One thing I like to point out, I do actually really agree with like the kind of agrarian mindset of like working the land is next to godliness, right? I believe it is a godly activity. But one of the interesting things is that agriculture was the punishment, right?
yeah,
Like we didn't have to, we were just living in the garden and the garden provided for us. And then
right,
scratching a living out of the dirt and taking care of animals was
yeah,
our punishment, right?
right.
And
Yeah,
I
and
think
even
part of the reason,
even before in the United States, before the Europeans came, they were advanced horticulturalists, right? They weren't
Mhm.
row cropping, at any like conceivable scale, but they were planting things. They were
Yeah,
definitely transforming their environment.
yeah.
They were,
I mean, it's one of the bounty of what the colonists found, right? They came here and said, "Oh my gosh, this is the Garden of Eden. There's fruit everywhere," and you're like, "That's because people have been tending this as a food forest for 2 millennia." Um, yeah. Anyway. I mean, they're one and the same, right? I view, and that's what one of the things that helped me kind of embrace business a little bit was that I realized it wasn't about me at all. That like I am here to achieve something, and if I have certain abilities that enable it to come to fruition, then that's it. That's like the extent of my job in this. And it doesn't mean a damn thing. Like if this thing really does grow into something very large, it wasn't me. It's going to be me and thousands of other people who make this come, and ultimately it's because of God. And um, what a joy to be a part of it while I get to be a part of it. And
Yeah.
uh,
Amen.
I'm very fortunate. Yeah, amen. I'm very fortunate to be able to do this every day and get
Yeah.
to be with God every day. In
Yeah.
such a overt way.
Well, it is interesting that both the beginning and end of the Bible, starts off in a garden. It ends up in the New Jerusalem, but in the New Jerusalem, there's the tree of life. There are the leaves that give the nation shade. I might be mixing these up a little bit. There are the fruits that, the trees that have several different types of fruits, and the invitation is come and eat, right? And so there's
Hmm.
these kind of like garden horticulture kind of messages, both bookending the Bible. So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty interesting and something to
And virtually
here for.
all of Jesus's parables are
Yeah,
agriculturally related,
yeah,
right? I find a lot of inspiration in, and I don't, I'm not only been doing this for a year and a half, so I'm hardly a scholar. But I love the passage where he asks about like whether the birds worry about food, where their next meal is coming from. If
right.
God cares about the least of these,
Hmm.
surely He will provide you with a meal.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I find it all very fascinating. As soon as St. Francis gave me permission to remain in an environmental zealot, right? He showed me that you can be both that it can be godly to be a
Hmm.
zealot in this way, right?
Yeah.
Um that it's not, I don't have to deny climate change. I don't have to go work at a fossil fuel company to be a Catholic and believe in Jesus. In many
Hmm.
respects, those things are anathema. And um, I that was a huge. I mean, it was a huge. It was really, I'd argue, the last rotten wall between me and my faith was just
Yeah.
realizing that I didn't have to compromise the things
Hmm.
that I believe about the earth, just to be a follower. In fact, they're reinforced. My
Right.
best impulses as a human are reinforced by my faith,
Well,
instead
to
of
get to
antagonistic
another
to it.
horticultural metaphor that Jesus uses, you were cultivating the rich soil, the the environmental zealotry, that when the seed came and was planted in your soil, it sprung forth.
Hmm.
Right? It wasn't choked out by thorns or on solid rocks that's, or, something else, right?
Yeah,
So there we go.
yeah,
There's another one.
yeah.
Um, this has been great. Yeah, I've covered most of my questions. I don't know. Anything else you want to chat about before we wrap this thing up?
Um, I would just like to reiterate what I think I've said multiple times on past podcasts, is that I think I love doomer optimism. I'm very proud to have been a part of it in the limited way I was and have been. Um, and
Well,
I really
that you're being modest, because if it wasn't for you, I don't think Doom Optimus podcast would have started. Because you're the one.
uh
We were doing a series on someone else's platform, just a one off, and you were like, "Hey, this could be a podcast."
yeah.
So you're the one who put the seed in our minds to even get it going. So you're being modest there. You were a big part of it. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay, sure. I think, I mean, the point I was trying to drive at is that, after the first flush of excitement about having this cool podcast and actually finding other people who were on the same wavelength with me, it became pretty obvious that if it's to do anything, if it's to have any purpose in the world, it is to spur action at the local level and regional
Absolutely.
level by individual people. And
Hmm.
in many respects, to act as my vision of GreenBox is that as a connecting force for people across the country or across the world who are actively making their own homes better, not for each other. Right? Because it doesn't matter. I mean, especially if the world becomes much more fractured, what you're doing in your home is irrelevant to me,
Hmm.
right? Except for, in some sort of abstract way, we breathe the same air, that kind of thing, right? But like, but we're still supporting each other. We're still
Hmm.
providing, solace and ideas and inspiration to one another. And so I hope that anytime I'm on this podcast, it does only one thing and gets people excited to go do something in their local community. Because I think the doing this is irrelevant unless we're all doing, right? We're
Yeah,
just talking.
absolutely.
And so I really thank you so much for providing me an opportunity to tell my story, and I hope
Yeah.
it's helpful to people.
Yeah, well, if people wanna, are inspired by this and wanna reach out either just to chat or for advice or even potential collaboration, where can they go?
Well, greenboxus.com or greenboxus.com is our website. You can also go right to hi@greenboxus.com. And that'll come to me, and I'd love to chat with you there. You can write me on Twitter, but I won't answer because I'm not on Twitter anymore. But I'm on Instagram. But I'm trying to. I'm hoping by what do you guys say? Been 10 years. I hope I'm not on any social media platforms at all. I hope that's over. But yeah, email me directly. That'd be great. I'd love to talk to
Mhm.
people, especially if you have a
Cool.
business idea and you want to throw it
There
by
you go.
somebody, or have a looking for a second opinion.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably be taking you up on that as this, perennial edible nursery idea starts getting off the ground.
Awesome.
Sweet, man. Well, this was fun. It's nice to catch up, Tress, for a second time, but, yeah, I like this. This was a good, chat.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, man.
All right,
Until
bye.
next time, take care. Bye.